Bill, thank you for being here today. Appreciate your time and all the work that you do for us.
Mr. Chairman, board members, well, first off, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate being here. Wonderful segment prior to listening to preschool and the challenges that you all face as far as levies, taxes collected, property taxes, and everybody's got a good idea on how to spend them, and everybody's got a good idea on how not to collect them. I will keep that short and just say that I am much more in favor of libraries than prisons, and I'll leave it at that.
Very good, thank you, sir.
15 years ago, the assessment roll equaled about $52 billion. The roll that you have in front of you, the 2019 roll, is $95 billion. We're processing the 2020 appeals. That roll is going to exceed $100 billion. This year's roll is the highest it's ever been. It's never been $95 billion before, even before the run-up and the decline in the real estate market. Our staffing levels are down 20% over the last 15 years. We estimate we're going to be under budget this year by over $1 million. We've been under budget every year since I've been elected. We're doing everything we possibly can at the assessor's office to maintain the integrity of the assessment roll and be a good steward of the taxpayers' dollars. It's a difficult job. I presented in front of you in February and suggested that maybe you try and lower the tax rates, lower the levies, so that you did not need to comply with the truth in taxation hearings. Doesn't appear that I was successful in guiding you in that direction. Subsequent to that, after the presentation and after budgets were submitted, the finance department, I'm going to assume through the county administrator, suggested that our budget be reduced by $700,000, or nearly 10%, 7 to 10%. It's concerning that you're not encouraging fiscal restraint, but you're punishing it. That just seems like a very bad message to be sending to the elected officials as well as the department heads. In the past, when, and I'm going back a couple of decades, I mean, this is before you folks were elected, Mr. Huckleberry was around back then, there were talks about trying to get wastewater to reduce their budget. They would come up with, oh, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to eliminate roach control in the sewers. Same thing happened with sheriff's patrols and whatnot. I'm not going to be draconian along those lines and try and suggest I'm going to do something terrible to stay under budget next year. I'll come up with a way. But that's a very bad precedent to be setting. To penalize someone that is, at least, again, obviously in my opinion as an elected official, trying to get some fiscal restraint into this body. And again, I appreciate that you've got huge requests for the money, for the levies you collect. Day in and day out, my office hears from taxpayers, property owners, that cannot make their payments, okay, cannot pay their taxes. Those people you need to hear from, not me. Again, we're doing everything we can, staying under budget, keeping staffing levels low, making sure all growth is accounted for, making sure the integrity of the role is maintained. And I'm trying to impart that to you. And I'll move on because it doesn't look like I have too much attention here. Let me read a paragraph out of Mr. Huckleberry's April 25th memorandum to the board, and it's the transmittal of the recommended fiscal year 1920 budget. And this is on page 8, it's the second paragraph. And bear with me because I did not write this. This is Mr. Huckleberry and or the finance staff. And I quote, "While a reduction in the debt service tax rate levy will assist in building a pay-go capital fund, it will also be necessary to reserve a component of the annual tax base growth, as well as allow the primary property tax rate to continue to be reduced over time. This simply means that the primary property tax rate will not decrease as much as it could based on continued tax base growth. Once achieved, secondary property tax rates for the debt service will eventually be zero. This milestone could easily be reached in the next 7 years. At that time, county general obligation bond debt will have been retired. In addition, it is likely that within 5 years, the county would be able to continue to meet truth in taxation standards, assuming continuing modest expansion of the tax base. This should reduce the non-pay-go primary property tax rate of $4 rounded to $4.07 to $3.64 within the next 5 years or sooner, lower than it has been since fiscal year 12-13. That paragraph is referencing the tax base 3 times. That's my job. We do the assessment role. Nowhere in here does it say raising taxes. However, in addition, it is likely that within 5 years, the county would be able to continue to meet truth in taxation standards. Mr. Huckleberry can certainly correct me, but it appears that he's suggesting you're looking at 5 years of truth in taxation hearings. Mr. Huckleberry was recently, I'll just say published, not quoted, in a weekly local publication that commercial and residential property taxes would essentially remain flat this year. Not go up, not go down. You're holding, according to this budget, you're holding 3 truth in taxation hearings. That's as many as you can hold. The debt service is not required to have a T&T hearing. So those 3 levies you're raising above neutral. You're raising taxes. Okay, and I don't have a problem, as I said when I started, libraries over prisons. I don't have a problem with raising taxes, but own up to it. Say that you're raising taxes. Don't say that, oh, we're reducing the tax rate. That, I'll use the term I used in February, that's disingenuous, that's misinformation. As far as talking about this year's budget, and I'm off my soapbox now. As far as talking about this year's budget, it's not my budget, it's Mr. Huckleberry's budget and the finances budget. It's $700,000 less than what we submitted. It was after the fact. After the fact, we were asked, how are we going to, what are we going to cut? What positions are we going to eliminate to stay within that recommended $700,000? And my response was, if this board decides to lower the budget by $700,000, we'll figure out a way. I've always been under budget. I intend to be this year as well. But that's a really bad precedent. And that's really bad as far as going forward with the other department heads, the other elected officials. Because trust me, I could have spent the money. It's very easy to spend the money. It's very difficult to save. The last thing I think is last year at this time we were talking about lawsuits, and we can certainly have that discussion. Out of the 42, 26 have been settled. Zero attorney's fees, zero losses. Over the 2 years, 18 and 19, we're coming up on $100 million that have been added to the roll. So, I'll be happy to field questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Staples. Any questions for our assessor?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Have a good day, Bill.
You too.